Hi everyone. Alright, in this video, let's explore controllers in Spring Boot, right? I believe you want to know how to do a post, how to do a get, basically all your code operations, right? We'll be getting into that in this video. The whole goal is for you to see the schematics that's basically used in Spring Boot. Let's get right into it. All right. Okay, so we have a famous project which is everything Spring Boot. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I already have a controller already set in here, right? So I already have a controller in here. So we did some things around this, right? When we're trying to explain the difference between REST controller and controller. So I'm just gonna create a dedicated controller to be able to actually showcase this and every aspect that is needed, right, for your applications. All right, so I'll go in and just create. I'll call it sample controller. All right, so we have sample controller. All right, now I believe now you understand the difference between REST controller and controller, and because we've already touched on that in previous videos, so you can basically just check the previous videos to see the details about that. So I'll just go in and double down on REST controller. So we have a REST controller. All right, so at REST controller, so I'll just quickly go through to highlight all the annotations that are needed, and then we'll be able to actually touch on one or two points before we wrap things up. All right, so let's create a DTO. DTO simply means data transfer object. I just create a DTO we just use to play around, right, to be able to showcase this. So what I'm gonna do right in here, right, I'll just go in here and create a DTO and create a DTO, and here I'm gonna call it, I'll just say sample response. I'll just call it sample response. All right, and in this sample response, I prefer to use a record, right? Prefer to use a record, and let's just return some few basic things. All right, I return a string name, I return a string, I return a string. Let's just say return a local date, date of birth. I'll just call it DOB, right? And I'll return an int. I'll return an int, which is for age, and let's just return something else. I'll just call it. Let's just call it. Okay, so I'll just call it probably last name. Okay, last name, right? For lack of, I'm just trying to look for something to put in there. Okay, last name. All right. All right. I think we should just call this full name, right? I just go with full name. So if we go with full name, I can basically just pick this and just return this here, right? The goal is not this DTO. The goal is for us to see exactly how this works. All right, so with that being said, I just go in and just bring everything in. All right, first off, if you want to do anything around creating objects or creating a data, you probably want to use a post request. And how to do post request is at post mapping. You do a post mapping, right? You have post mapping, then you basically just return this. So I'm going to return something called a response entity. I would explain this in a bit, right? I'll explain this in a bit. Or I'll just start off by returning the sample response, right? Sample response. And I'll tell you why it is advisable you use the response entity. I'm just going to say create object. Just call it create object. Basically, it just takes in, let's take in a detail. Let's create another DTO. Let's call it sample request. I'll just call it sample request. And sample request will also take in will also be a record, and basically just returns, let's say just takes in full name and just age, right? Just something simple, right? Something simple. All right, I'm gonna take this, I'm just gonna place this here. So the way it works is, if you're actually using at post mapping, you need to be able to receive your object using what you call at request body. At request body. All right, so request body, then you have the sample, you have that the sample request, then the sample request. Basically that works in. Then when we do anything complex, then with that being said, then I can just go in and probably just do return, and I'll just do sample response, and my sample response will just be new sample response, right? And what do I need in my sample response? As you can see, I need the full name, so I'll just say sample request dot full name. Then what do I have here? The local date of birth. I didn't have that, so I'm gonna pay this dot age. Then in between this, we need that, so I'll just go in and just say local date of. Local date of, I'll just say 1995. 1995, and I'll just say the month is 12 and the day is 20. All right, so that basically just gives me that bit, and I'll just return this. All right, so as simple as that. This is how you create your post mapping. This is basically how it works. Nothing more than this. It's just as simple as this. Okay, let's see why this is complaining. Just saying month, use a Java month literal instead of int. Okay, this works. All right, this works. The other still works. You can actually use both. Okay, I think it's just a suggestion you should use this, but both basically works. All right, so how to actually do your get mapping. Your get mapping is just as simple as saying get mapping. All right, get mapping. Right, I would recommend you don't skip this video at this point because I need to basically touch on something very important in a few minutes. All right, so a sample response, then I'll just say get object. Let's just call it get object, and this can come in two shapes, right? If you're actually using a path parameter, and if you're using a path parameter, and if you're using a request parameter. All right, I'm going to demo both to you. All right, for the path parameter, it will take something of this shape, the path parameter, or path variable, I meant to say. Path variable, then the path variable, you need to tell it exactly what it maps to, right, for it to be able to be noticed in here. All right, so with that being said, before we proceed, let's go in and bring in what we call as request mapping. Request mapping is the base, so I'm just going to label this as sample. Remember, I love to use path so that it will have, so I can avoid using the forward slash, right? And this will append. So post, I'll leave post as it is. You can just create object like this, and that will work. For this, for get mapping, get is also fine, but in this case, I want to map to a path variable. So to map to a path variable, I'm just gonna say full name. I'm gonna say full name, right? If I pass in full name here, right, what I'm expected to, I need, if you see this, you can then pass the variable here and call it full name. Full name. Then I'll call this string full name. Please note, if this is the same, if you can choose to omit this. If you omit this, this has to be equal to this. They have to be the exact same thing for it to basically map. Or you can just decide to use both of them. That basically works. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm not going to do anything special. I'll just go in here and just return the same thing, right? I'll just return the same thing. But this time around, let's just mock something in here. I'll just go in and just say Ezekiel. You know, say. Then I have it here. Then I'll just take this to the age. Basically, I'll just say 30. All right. So we have that in here, and that basically works. So whenever you place something in here that actually maps, so let's just bring in this full name. So it will basically just work for us. So whatever we pass in here is what is returned. All right. If you want a request parameter, this time around, you would not need to actually have something within this part. So I can just take this off. I'll come back to it in a minute and just change it to request param. So request param. So in this case, let's take in the age, right? Let's take in the age, and I'll have the int. Now call it age. And for this age, I'll just place the age in here. So for the age, let's say this is 30. So if this is 30, let's convert this to a local date. Before then, let's just do this. Ezekiel, that basically works, right? All right. So what I'm gonna do, I'll just make this very simple, right? So we don't actually make this too long. So I'm just gonna say 2026 minus then age. All right. So just to bring this in here, and whatever we have will basically be what we have in here. All right. I hope that you understand this bit. Just trying to do some simple logic. So this is how you bring in a request param. All right. But you need to be careful, right? You need to be careful because you need to ensure that the part you're trying to mirror, right? You understand the part you're really trying to mirror. Now we have this request mapping. Post mapping will not need anything extra in front of it. For the get mapping, right? We can just probably call it get one. We can probably just call this get one. and this part. All right, so we can actually have something like this, and that would basically mirror. So we'll have get one and place this. This case also, we can basically have get one. I can just say get single just to differentiate it, right? Just to differentiate it, I'll call it get single. All right, so that basically maps in here. Now let's do a post. Sorry, let's do a put. So a put is when you're basically modifying a put mapping. So I can have a put mapping, and I can decide to remove this also. Why? Because we only have one single HTTP verb actually. So this post is going to sample, right? So basically just have probably the localhost 8080/sample. So post also can have the same thing. The same way we can choose to omit this one, can choose to take this one. So just have sample/full name, right? Whatever you place in the full name will be what will be mirrored in here. And this part will say get single. So this will require so that it doesn't conflict with this, right? So that way we can choose to remove this. Then this part also, I can say put mapping. I'll just say, okay, here I call it get single. Let's say get one. It's good you make the names different. Also get single. All right, I'll just say put single, right? And for the put single, basically you can just have request body also. You can basically just pass in the request body, right? Pass in the request body, and let's just mirror the same thing, right? Let's just mirror the same thing. Let's mirror the same thing, right? This is not the ideal scenario. I'm just trying to basically just show you how all these things basically come in and how you can use them. Then finally, sorry, we have delete. We still have patch. There is patch. There is the patch mapping. Patch mapping also exists. I'll say patch single, and I'll just basically, let's just take in equal. Let's take this in also. Let's just have the same thing, right? That basically works. And all I'll be interested in here is probably let's bring in we have the local dates. I'll just bring in the age. Let's bring the age 30, and for this I'll just put in just the full name alone. All right, that basically works. Then finally, let's have the delete mapping. And I'll just say delete single. And for the delete single, I'll just probably let's just take in a request param. I'll just take in a request param. And this, it should always return void. When you're deleting, it shouldn't return anything, so to say. So I'll just return this, and I'll just print. So let's bring in an SLF for J, which we've been using throughout. So SLF for J, and I'll just say log.info, just say deleted record with age. I'll just bring this in age. All right, so that basically works. All right, so this is basically how you use your post mapping, get mapping, the put mapping, patch mapping, and delete mapping. Now, this style came to be in Spring Boot 2 and above, right? For Spring Boot 1, you would not find this. This does not exist then. What you will find, right? What you will find is, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to place this, I'm going to replicate this sample controller. Let's call it sample 2 controller, so that you have the two versions. So for this, I'll call it sample 2 so that it's differentiated and they don't conflict. For post mapping, you have at request mapping, right? At request mapping, then you have method. Then the method, for the method, you now have at request method post. This is what you have previously. So previously, this is what you have at request mapping post, right? So you can see it's saying we should basically replace this with this, but both works basically, because if you check this out, I think it's deprecated. Is it deprecated? No, it's not deprecated. It's still in use, right? So you can actually use this. This is what you have before in Spring Boot 1 and early part of Spring Boot 2. All right. So the same thing actually you have here. I'll just bring this in here. This would then be delete, right? This would then be delete. Then you also place in, you see it has the concept of path. So placing your path, and my path would be / this. Remember, because I'm using path, I don't need to put in the forward slash. So I can just have this and just place this in here. All right. So that works. Then you've already guessed it. You already know what this is going to be. So this will just be get single. I'll just place this as get single. Right. Now take this off. So I hope it's pretty much clear now. Right. Then for the puts mapping, you've guessed it already. So this is just going to be, just change this to what? Puts. Just change it to puts, and this will not have anything. Right? This will also not have anything because we want it to actually match sample 2. Then likewise, if we take this, right? If we take this for the patch mapping, you've already guessed it also. Just change this to what? Patch. All right. So this is pretty cool. Then for delete mapping, as you've guessed it also, I'll just take this and just place it what? I'll just make it delete. So apparently this is basically all you need to do. All right. So what we then need to do, let's quickly test it out and let's see how it works, right? Let's quickly test it out. Then we quickly double down into response entity, and I'm sure you guys can figure the rest out. So I'm gonna go in and bring in my postman. To bring it in. But however, if you want something cool, you could also have Spring also have something, or should I say IntelliJ also have something called HTTP-IE, which you could also bring in, right? You see, you could create something like this. You see, by me pressing this, it brought this in for me, basically, right? So if you see, if I do this also, you can see it creates this for me. If I do this also, you see, it creates this for me. So this basically just gives me everything I need. All right, you get the concept, right? You get the concept. So I'm going to delete this part. This is if you're using IntelliJ. I think it's also available in community version, right? You just need to just install the plugin, right? I think that's HTTP request or so, or HTTP IE. All right, so what I'm going to do, these are the ones I've used before. So let's go in. Let's click this. Let's click this. Let's click this. Let's click this. And let's click this. All right, so I'll just go in and run the application. Okay, so the application is running. Now for the first one, which is for this sample. Where is the sample? Yeah, this is the first sample. Let's see. This is the sample that takes the age part and likes just a random integer, right? So you could just say Ezekiel. Oh, sorry, just bring this here. Just say Ezekiel. And I would say this is 30. Right. Okay, so this is the puts. Okay, sorry, I want to start from the post rather. Let's say Ezekiel. Daniel Romaser. Right, so we have that. Then we have 30. This basically just works like post one, so you don't necessarily have to use this, okay? All right, and this, what is wrong in here? Let's check this out. I'll just take this out. I'll bring it in again, okay? So let's just come in here, and if I do this, okay, invalid URL. All right, so let's see where this is coming from. Basically, so we have the post, we have this, the request mapping, the sample request mapping gives us everything we need. We have the full name and the age, which basically maps exactly what we need. That's for the sample. All right, so we have exactly what we need. Then this part, all right, say illegal arguments, this age 72. For this part, this is not necessary here. Let's take this out. And hit this again. Okay, why is this complaining? So this is server ports, and let's see 8080. Then this part, let me bring this in. What's this basically doing? Let's see, invalid URL, HTTP localhost this. Then I take this out. All right, so apparently I think it wasn't understanding this, right? So let's take this out. Let's remove this. I think that's what's basically causing it. So if we try this, all right, so we see we get a response back. Okay, so that basically works. So we have that. So if we try to get with the full name, you see the full name here. So instead of having the full name, that's the path variable, I would just basically let me see, That's what it gets. So I'll just remove this also. Remember this, that caused the issue the last time. I'm going to remove this. The same thing is sample. Then for the path variable, I'll just put in the name directly. This is not necessary. I'll just put in the name directly. I'll just say Ezekiel. Then Ramesses. Because there's going to be a space, or let me just put in Ezekiel. That'll be percentage 20. So when you have a space when it's been interpreted in URL is something like percentage 20. Percentage 20. All right, so let's try that out. Okay, so you can see it gets that out for you. That basically works. The same thing also, if you're trying to test this get single, which is the request param, this is basically how you get single, then it has this. Then I'm going to remove this A. Let's just put in maybe 15. And let's just add this also. Okay, all right, sorry, this same thing. Let's remove it up. And as you can see, it works. So I'll go ahead and just change this to sample 2 to mirror what we have in this part to show that this also works. I'll change this also to 2, change this also to 2. Let's test it out. As you can see, this basically works. And if you see the URL, let's look at the URL. Where is the URL listed here? Let's see. Yeah, so you can see sample 2. The same way too, if I hit this, you see it basically works. Okay, let's see. What is this saying? It says get is not supported for this. Let's see. Oh, sorry. This should be get. This should be get. Should be get. Let's just run this again. Okay. So if we hit this also, this basically just gives us this part, right? All right, great. So we've been able to actually show that either for sample or either for sample 2 that it basically works. All right. So now there's one important thing I need to quickly tell you right before we wrap up this video. Okay, which is I would always recommend you don't return your objects directly, right? Always wrap it within a response entity. So let's just do that quickly for this and I'll tell you why. So for response entity, I'll just say response entity, then place it within a response entity. Then for this, there are 2 ways to basically do it. You can say response entity.ok, right? And placing the body in there. And once you do that, that basically works. Or you could basically say new response entity. The same way I'm going to have this here. So you could basically have this, place this here, right? So you have that. Okay, this also, I want to place this as response entity. I'll do this. Let's make this response entity.ok. You can have this. Or you here, right? I said you could also have another style. You could say new response entity, right? New response entity. You see, it takes in a lot of details where you can then be able to specify so many things. Like you want to specify the object's body and the status code. So I could basically place in the object body. That's the object body. Then I'll place in the HTTP status. I'll just say HTTP status dot okay. And you can basically have that too, right? So it's just basically, it has a lot of overloaded methods you could basically pick from, and that works. Then let's quickly complete these ones, right? I'll just go ahead and just complete this one, place this here, and basically I think that should be it. Then let's just wrap this within response entity.ok, right? And that basically works. And finally, I'll bring this and just do response entity.ok. All right, and this actually brings it in. All right, so if we rerun this, and check our scratch, right? We have our scratches, and if we bring this in, we have what we were using before. And if I were to run this again, you see we still have the same response. It doesn't basically take anything out, right? But the beautiful thing it then does, so let's test one more. We have this. What it does for you is that it includes a lot of content which can then be used, right? If you're basically connected to a front-end application that needs to basically wire into your application, it might need things like the cookies, the cache control, several other details that might be necessary for whoever is consuming your API. And that is what response entity provides to you. Now, if you check the implementation, open up response entity, right? Open up response entity. Now, if you scroll down response entity, you would see it now has things like a builder. There's a builder to it, and you start finding things like cache control and what have you. You see, you have things like where are you? Where's the cache control? So you can see you have things like the URI, you have things like the last modified date, you have things like the cache control. Now, where you see the beautiful parts where you're going to see it is if you basically call it from, say, a postman. So I'm going to bring up a postman and just quickly show this because I know the time is fast spent. So I'm just going to do this. Then local host, it's an A, local host, then 8080 class sample. All right. Then slash, let's just say Ezekiel, then Ramesses. Let's hit this. All right. So this basically works. Now explore this. Check when you have this. Let's go. Okay, this is there. Now, if you check, if you look at the headers, can you see the header contains things like the dates, the connection, you have the content type. So you have more details actually coming to you. That is the reason why you should use response entity. It gives you more details, right, to be able to work with, and you can even customize it. But most often times I tell you, you don't need to customize it except you have a special request to what you're actually connecting to. So I've been able to show you how you have, or should I say, the HTTP verbs in Spring Boot, right? The post, the puts, the post, the puts, the get, the patch, the delete, right? And I also showed you two style, using the old style, right? And also using the new style. Like I mentioned earlier, you have the old style in this format and you have the new style, right? I'm sure with this being said, if you're working with legacy projects, you now know exactly what this means. So don't be confused. Some legacy projects only have this. Don't think it's different from this. They're just the same. This is just an alias that's basically created for this particular one. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.